So, my name is Russell Gobblesall. I'm a partner of BP Experts, and I would like to talk in this blog about why BPM and AI are a match made in heaven. Now, to explain this, I think there's been a lot of discussion about how AI models can be used, the large language models, and especially when it comes down to stop ChatGPT or other AI large language models from hallucinating, it's very important to give a specific context, and that more and more models that will be put on the market do rely on actually giving a very specific context to the answers that are to then be created. So I'll give you an example of this. So we and this is something in the context of what we're talking about. In a lot of discussions around process management, it's always very important to actually discuss first clear definitions and create a clear meta model on how actually you define what a process is and how certain activities within this process create a certain input and output. You have to agree upon certain business rules. Now, a lot of the questions that you may prompt in a ChatGPT, it will start generating full sentences, and if you read them, they will sound quite solid, but it is all based on a lot of data that has been taken from the internet. And if you go through the internet and if you talk to other people, for example, about a business context, you will find many different definitions. You'll find many different answers. And there's no real wrong or right. It's just very important that within a company, you agree upon one specific definition and a specific measure model about the granularity, the inputs and outputs, the involved responsibilities, and all this is like your common book of knowledge around the company. Now, if this was all written down in big documents, say like policies and contracts in full sentences, then of course this is first of all a super source for large language models to dig in. And here you have the embedding models where you can then take these documents and you can vectorize them and you could do similarity searches, and you could also embed this specific knowledge into a large language model to give it certain context. But you will see that again here, the clear definition, the relations between each of these elements that are described with these full sentences, that they are not so clear that the ChatGPT will actually create great answers, or the AI, the large language model. So what a lot of the techniques are talking about nowadays is that you use this RAG model, where you say specifically use the large language model to interpret your prompt, but for given a specific context, it triggers functions that will then query in a very structured way, query the data to then provide you with an explicit answer based on your content. Now, in order to do this with big documents that have maybe 10, 5, or how many other pages, this does not work so well either, because again, the data in these documents are sometimes not super exact. There's like fuzziness in there. And in order to make this work, you have to decompose the documents and you have to put them into a specific form that actually then the large language model and the similarity search can actually then identify relevant documents and again then interpret in hopefully a correct manner and compile the right answer. Now, this also, some companies talk about this semantic layer and building this up. This is something that you can set up. Yeah, so there are again algorithms that can decompose, summarize your big documents and then put them into a knowledge graph, and then provide this knowledge graph as a baseline then for giving your prompts specific context. Now, if you're looking at this, and then this is where I'm going to jump into the demo. If you're talking about this idea of taking like large documents, yeah, and then breaking them down into the essential parts and putting these essential parts into then relation with each other. That is exactly what process management does with its architecture. So for example here, and I'll just jump first of all into a very fine decomposed functional structuring of your processes. All processes in a functional process map are structured according to a certain easy hierarchy. So here we have a cluster where all the sales processes are then collected, and under a process group like pre-order management, we will then also have a dedicated set of processes. And each of these processes, again, consists of activities. And so what we're doing here, each of these little, let's say, elements of this structure is already in such a fine granularity and with a very clear structure and relation between all these elements that it can be directly digested by the large language models. So the way process management builds up a process framework, builds up a clear hierarchy of processes, but also puts them into a context to a certain business, for example, a collaborative sales process, where we have a sequence of processes. All this is already decomposing and building up the knowledge graph, because on the bottom line, each of these objects is like a graph, and all the relations, if it's like the sequence we see here, or it's the relation to other artifacts, that this scenario is composed of different processes and there are interfaces to certain scenarios. This is all captured in the repository as relations of these objects, so a real complex graph. Now, with additional attributes like descriptions, which typically are also just quite short, we already have the ideal setup for applying this augmented generation, these models, to actually then include them in such a context. Now, what we've done, just jump to a different model. So here we have also in our showcases, we've just built up different AI scenarios, assistants. And if you can here easily test how these are through routed to the OpenAI playground. And here you can directly test how well you can get specific answers based on the structured process model versus just having like the generic ChatGPT assistants without any tools, having embedded documents as tools, and then having dedicated function calls where then certain relations and mappings are queried and the explicit attributes, for example, description, or which SAP scope items are in relation to end-to-end scenarios, which business roles are in relation to, or which processes are in relation to certain end-to-end scenarios, that these can then explicitly be answered. And then without hallucination, you get an exact answer. So also here, the common agreement and the defined process models in the company are referred to, and you do not get any best guess, or maybe the first three are right and the rest are then, let's say, hallucinated, but you do get explicitly the answers that are there. And without, and that's the important thing, that's why I think it is a match made in heaven, without having to artificially decompose documents and then vectorize them, but you can immediately directly use the graph knowledge database, it has been set up by process management. And that's exactly where in the past a lot of these repositories have been, like, I'm not saying sunk cost, but they have been built up, also very structured, highly qualitative data in there, but it's always been hard to retrieve the data. So looking at it from the other perspective, AI is a huge opportunity to, I would say, dig out these repositories and then harvest the knowledge that is in there, where before, due to the lack of the user interfaces of tools, the accessibility, that it was also the not understanding of the actual meta model, because to be able to explicitly query, you would have to actually then ask the right questions and you have to have the right report. And here, the capabilities of AI help actually identify within this big amount of data the right where places to look, and then, as I said, then tapping into the meta model and the constructs you have here, we can pull out explicit knowledge. Yeah, so it works in both directions. BPM is a great baseline of building up your knowledge base to be then provide the context to AI in a business context. And on the other hand, AI is a great opportunity to reuse or harvest out the knowledge that has been built up. Okay,